And happy Bologna Day to everyone out there who is an Oscar Mayer wiener. Welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your semi-bi-weekly news source for everything happening in enterprise and IT. I am Tom Hollingsworth, one of the co-hosts of this show. I am joined today by the newest member of the Gestalt IT family, Mr. Ken Nalbone. Ken, hello from the Hoosier State. How are things with you?
Oh, things are wonderful. Happy to be here and to, on day 3, just get thrown into a podcast. Why not?
That's kind of how it works is we hit the ground running and then we chase you with really sharp objects to see
hmm
just how fast you can go.
Yeah, I've been poked a couple times already.
Well, I think you'll probably be okay. This is just it's a fun little take on the news. It's what we do.
Yeah,
We find some news stories that we look at it and go, you know what? There's probably a joke or two to be made here.
sure. Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started because we got an exciting lineup of stuff. And just like always, we're probably going to start with a story about Supermicro.
Of
Just when
course.
you thought this was going to fade into the distance, we've got round 2 coming up. And this time, the alleged victims are the ones that are fighting back. Both Amazon and Apple have said that they need to retract this story. Tim Cook has publicly come out and said, this did not happen. There is no truth to this. You don't get much more clear than that when it comes to a denial. Amazon and Apple don't call for stories to be retracted. I can remember seeing some of the worst stories in the history of the world being published about iPhones breaking and iPads being the most useless device ever. And never once did Apple say, you know what, you need to retract the story because it's untrue. But now they're saying Bloomberg absolutely has to retract this story. That's even bigger than the legal position that they took, putting themselves out there with the SEC and saying basically that this is a false story. Ken, are we ever going to see one of the sides related to this whole thing blink and finally give up the ghost?
If so, I don't think it'll be anytime soon. I mean, there's a lot at stake on both sides. You've got Bloomberg, who has their reputation to protect. They're not publicly traded. They're not subject to the same fines and possibly even prison time, if I can talk, that Apple and Amazon are subject to, but you still don't see them budging because they want to be the reliable source for information. But at the same time, we see a lot of criticality, and critical analysis coming against Bloomberg. For example, I read a very in-depth analysis by Patrick Kennedy of Serve the Home. He picked apart the feasibility of the hardware hack as it was described by Bloomberg, and also kind of picks apart the language, both technically and logically, in that article. And he seems to find more flaws in their logic than he finds, feasibility. I'm inclined to agree, but I'm still waiting for the truth to come out. I'm not really sure what the truth is at this point.
I don't know that anybody knows what the truth is. I mean, we've seen articles saying that Bloomberg did artist renderings of where this chip might have been located if it was actually the case. We've had Apple and Amazon come out and say that they've talked to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice says there's nothing here. I mean, you've got 2 of the largest tech companies in the world making some very specific denials, and you've got Bloomberg, who quite honestly is sticking to their story. Obviously, both sides can't be true. So hopefully we'll get to the end of this before the end of the year, before the last Q4 report comes out and the investors sell off their stock.
I was going to say, we're kind of getting to that point in the year where people just check out of work. Once we hit Thanksgiving, nobody's going to do anything. So by the end of the year, not the calendar year, I doubt it.
Yeah, it'll probably be a footnote somewhere in the ad section of a Bloomberg magazine. Oh, hey, by the way, that thing we said that was completely made up. Sorry. Move on about your lives. Yeah. Oh well. We'll see the end eventually. Moving on, we've gotten some more exciting news from the FCC, and this time it's not about net neutrality. The FCC voted today actually to open up the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum for use in 5G radio networks, and in a separate vote, opened up the 6 gigahertz range for use in future wireless equipment. Now, for those of you who out there who are not wireless nerds, 3.5 gigahertz is a really critical piece because it's going to extend the reach of the upcoming 5G standard, which I'm sure you've probably seen advertisements for in the airport. It offers a really good mix of distance and object penetration. So for those of you who are not wireless nerds, sometimes radio waves don't go through houses. And so the better those radio waves can get through the house, the more your signal works better. The spectrum is currently allocated to the U.S. Navy for radar use. And the U.S. Navy said, wait, we have that? Because evidently they don't ever use it, and they definitely don't use it for radar because it's actually really inefficient for that. So it's basically been sitting there unused. and a group has lobbied the FCC to go ahead and open that up. So that's really great. Now with 6 gigahertz, this is actually kind of exciting because this is going to add a significant amount of spectrum to a lot of new deployments in the future. Now, right now, what it's being used for is microwave satellite transmissions. Okay, that sounds really boring. That was one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't want to use the spectrum, is because they were afraid there was going to be a whole lot of interference. But this last week, when I was at Wi-Fi Trek, Chuck Lubashevsky, who works for Aruba Networks, did a really amazing in-depth talk about the research that they've been doing on the 6 gigahertz spectrum and how they've proven that the interference with the satellite networks is minimal, if there at all. So that pretty much cleared the way for the FCC to kind of open things up. And hopefully 6 gigahertz is going to give us a little bit more performance. Now, the question that I have for you, Ken, is this going to make you want to go out and buy all new Gen 7 or Gen 8 Wi-Fi when the time comes?
Well, you'll never see me complain about better and faster wireless in general. So time will tell. If 3.5 gigahertz is that good mix of object penetration and distance, I'm not sure. You could probably fill me in as more of the expert. What does 6 gigahertz give us? I'm not an expert on RF transmission, but I do know that the higher the frequency, you can transfer more data, but at the expense of object penetration. And all us IT geeks who have offices in the interior of the building with no windows, who are going to be testing this equipment, are going to find out what roadblocks exist pretty quickly, right? And what are they going to be? What are the use cases going to be of this spectrum? What do you think?
So the short version is that in order to get really fast Wi-Fi speeds, you have to create channels. Most APs have a channel that's about this wide. Well, you could take 2 of them and get a channel that's this wide, or 4 of them and get one that's this wide, and so on and so on. But the problem is that you're limited by the number of channels in the spectrum as to how wide you can make those things. So currently with the 802.11 AC Wave 2 radios that we have in 5 gigahertz, there are support up to 160 megahertz channels, which, if you're doing math, is 8 times wider than the current channel bandwidth default of 20 megahertz. That's good news if you want to move a lot of data at once. It's bad news if you're trying to plan a deployment that uses more than 2 or 3 non-overlapping channels, because there's really only support for 2 of those in the band. So by adding 6 gigahertz and all of the channels that are available there, you've created an additional range of 20, 40, 80, and 160 megahertz channels, which means you could conceivably make super fast Wi-Fi that doesn't have a lot of interference. Now, again, there's a big star right there, because a lot of that involves client support. And as some of our good friends in the wireless community, like Sam Clemens and Blake Croney, have demonstrated time and time again, just because you make the Wi-Fi big and fast does not necessarily make it fast and reliable.
Right. And we've had 2.4 gigahertz and now 5 gigahertz for a while. And here's another spectrum to add to your equipment. And by the way, you need to buy, you mentioned those new clients as well as the access points or whatever transmitting equipment.
Yeah, exactly. And don't rush out to Best Buy and start asking for this stuff right now, because we're not anywhere close. Basically, wait until someone who's a wireless nerd in your family tells you that it's okay to go buy the stuff, and I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it turns out we do a lot of chip stories here on the rundown. It turns out that making chips is actually really hard. Intel has released some reports this week that say that they're lagging behind in their new 10 nanometer process for chip manufacturing. For those of you who don't know, basically they're taking the big chip and they're shrinking it down. But the smaller you get, the harder it is to make ones that work properly. So their 10 nanometer yields are really low, which means they're not putting a lot of chips on the market. And in a maybe somewhat related story, it sounds like they're going to split up their manufacturing group into 3 different divisions. One's going to be all focused on technology development. The other one's going to be focused on supply chain for resources. And the last one's actually going to be for manufacturing and operations. Now, here's the question that I've got, being a person who just recently switched to, the not Intel chip for my PC. Will this organization help them focus on things and get them back on track? Or really, could this be the end of the inside of Intel? Ken, how familiar are you with this chip manufacturing process, and what do you think?
I'm a bit familiar. What I think is, will this restructuring get them back on track? I'm not sure. Is it the end of Intel? I highly doubt it. They've had several missteps over the years that they've managed to recover from. And, the delays in 10 nanometer manufacturing are just the latest. Of course, you've got executives making statements about improving yields and volume production. How close those are to reality, I can't say. But if you've been around long enough, you remember things like maybe about 20 years ago. They started losing the megahertz battle or gigahertz battle with AMD. And then all of a sudden it turned out, well, that matters less than multiple threads, hyper-threading and multi-core CPUs and things like that. That's one way they recovered. And then it was, well, 64-bit computing is the future, and the future of 64-bit computing is Itanium. And well, that was not correct. And they had to backtrack and, adopt the x86 64-bit architecture. But, then they recovered pretty well from that. Is this reorganization going to help them recover from their kind of slow rollout of 10 nanometer manufacturing? I don't know. If it doesn't, they'll probably figure it out before long. I mean, they've been the 800-pound gorilla for so long that, the closest competition isn't even likely to displace them anytime soon.
Yeah, that's true. And the irony is that with the CISC-based architectures that they're still operating on, the x86 stuff, the reason why the yields are so low is because the chips are so damn complicated. I mean, my iPhone currently runs off of a 7-nanometer ARM SoC. So we know that they can make the chips smaller, but that processor is not nearly as complicated as the one that's currently sitting in MacBook somewhere. So time will tell. Hopefully they'll be able to get this figured out. You're right. I don't see Intel going away anytime soon, but who knows? Maybe Broadcom or Qualcomm will put in a bid for them. We'll see how that goes. All right. So I hope you've gotten your daily dose of Linux news, because we're going to give you an extra shot. In a retirement so short that even a professional wrestler would be amazed, Linus Torvalds has made his return to Linux. He did a run-in at the Open Source Summit in Europe in Scotland this week, and he's now wielding the steel chair of kernel maintenance once again. Linus has stepped away from Linux last month because he felt that his behavior might have been driving people away from joining as a part of the community. He is pretty infamous for his outbursts on the kernel mailing list, but they've got a new code of conduct in place, and that new code of conduct says that maintainers should really lead by example. Now, Ken, are we seeing a new babyface Linus here, or is the heel Torvalds going to show up at our next big pay-per-view?
I don't know. It seems like a month is hardly enough time to adjust your behavior the way that he indicated he wanted to, but we've seen celebrities check into rehab and return in wake of a scandal, and then they return squeaky clean just a few weeks later. So maybe, Linus is going to the same attitude readjustment centers, and we'll see him back better than ever until the next time that he blows up at somebody.
Yeah, that's true. And I find it funny that they're really focusing on the fact that Linus said that he wanted to step away from the development process because he felt like he was discouraging people from being a part of it, when another big elephant in the room was that the open source kernel development team literally moved their conference the week before it was supposed to start because nobody forgot to ask Linus where he was taking his vacation, and they were going to be on opposite sides of the world. And they're like, oh, hey, well, we'll just move it because we want to be close to you because this whole thing doesn't work without you. That's creepy. And I think that was part of the reason why they stepped away, but there's no addressing there. And in the news article that I read about this, like, they made a big show of the fact that the temporary maintainer of the kernel, who's had the job, well, not even long enough to draw unemployment at this point, graciously returned it back to Linus. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there applauding and quite a few people who are kind of cringing because, yeah, you're right. A month, maybe he got his stuff together. I also can Google all of the times that he's used curse words on the Linux kernel mailing list, and that's a pretty long history.
It's more than one page of Google results, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. It is many pages of the Google results. Ken, I'm hoping that you've got a lot of your life savings investments in cryptocurrency, just like the rest of the world and fans of the show. But realistically speaking, if you're going to jump the shark, you might as well have a phone to call somebody when it comes to this. HTC has announced that they are taking pre-orders for their new Exodus 1 handset. Well, why is that important? It's a blockchain phone. It includes a secure area that has a wallet that can't be accessed by the rest of the Android OS. If you recall earlier, and probably you didn't because nobody recalls this, HTC earlier this year had made some pretty grand plans for this phone. They wanted to make it a kind of a clearinghouse for cryptocurrency transactions to kind of get people really trading that Bitcoinage. They wanted to make it a centralized area for all of your identity management needs. They basically wanted to turn it into like the old smart cards from back in the day. Yeah, and you know what we ended up with? We ended up with a phone that has a really, really secure wallet. And if you forget your password, or if your phone gets tossed into under a dump truck somewhere, you have a social media recovery system so that you can get back all those precious, precious Bitcoins that you're hoarding and hoping the price is going to go up. Now, here's the other catch. You can only buy this phone if you buy it with cryptocurrency. Right now, the street price is just under $1,000 US, which I believe is like 0.12 Bitcoins or like 4 something Ethereum and change. So hopefully if you don't lock in your pre-order today, that could go up or down depending on whether or not the local mining cluster at your university shuts down for the holidays. Ken, is this the perfect device for people on Twitter that can't do anything other than talk about blockchain?
Well, if you were to ask these people's opinion, I'm sure they'd give you a very long answer. My short answer is this is dumb. You're right. I don't remember this coming up earlier this year, but I can tell that it basically will appeal to a small subsection of an already niche crowd. I mean, how many crypto enthusiasts do you know that prefer to purchase something purpose-built rather than build it themselves? I don't know many people that are building their own phone, but these folks that have their own crypto set up and have written their own algorithm to know when to trade coins, they're probably also going to come up with some way to build a better phone, and they'll be critical of this thing anyway, more so than even I would, who just, I don't buy into it at all. So, I don't see this going anywhere in a very quick time frame.
I also think it's hilarious that HTC has taken this this idea of doing like a secure enclave, and they're keeping a wallet in it. Meanwhile, their closest competitor, that Cupertino Fruit and Phone Company, is using their secure enclave to do things like keep your identity information, your biometrics, basically have an invalid trust center that people can rely on for all kinds of things. I guess it just goes to show you who's more interested in what, right?
I guess so. And I don't really understand what you're talking about with this social media recovery tool. I mean, you definitely need to address the fact that if you lose the phone, you're going to lose your cryptocurrency. But how does that work?
They actually, the Verge did not have a whole lot of details about it, which to me says they haven't even figured it out themselves yet. But I'm pretty sure you know what it's going to be. It's probably going to be a tweet, a Facebook post, and a Snapchat pic with a filter on it. And all three of those things hashed together will be you, and then they'll unlock your wallet and you can extract the 0.0002 Bitcoins that you've been mining with your rig at home and, I don't know, buy a pizza with them maybe.
Thank heavens.
Yeah. All right. And finally, it's Oracle Open World Week. And I know this is the moment everyone in the show has been waiting for. We're going to talk about Larry Ellison. We're actually going to talk about something else first, though, because does everybody remember Amazon Prime Day? I certainly do. The UPS trucks were rolling by my house for days, delivering all the junk that I ordered that I didn't need. But the funny thing is that on Amazon Prime Day, things didn't work quite as well as we would have liked. Well, this week, Amazon released a correction of error postmortem, detailing exactly what went wrong when the Prime Day decided to have a meltdown. And it turns out that this is partially to blame because of their continuing efforts to migrate away from Oracle. Amazon has a plan to replace all of the Oracle spend that they have with Aurora PostgreSQL by 2020. That's just 2 years away, guys. And the Ohio warehouse, in this case, that was the culprit of the whole meltdown, had already been migrated away and had lost some critical visibility tools that would have helped Amazon diagnose these problems before they happened. Now, I don't know if they could have been able to avoid those problems before they happened, but that's a hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. Larry Ellison, who is currently at Oracle Open World this week, has gone on record in the past with a statement that says, and I quote, "Amazon isn't moving off of Oracle. I don't think they can do it." Does this mean that Oracle is the only solution for massive e-commerce databases? Can Amazon slay the Oracle beast and implement their own system? And it sounds like it's a little bit rocky to start with. And lastly, and this is really the most important question, does this mean that Larry Ellison won't have enough money for a sail machine dock at his secret island volcano lair?
Well, I don't really know about Larry Ellison's finances, but I know that this article, I hope Amazon can figure this out, but the article was discouraging. Amazon seems like one of the most likely companies to figure out how to move off of Oracle effectively. If they can't figure it out, who can? It'll be interesting to see what happens as the holiday shopping season starts approaching. I don't know if there's any single day, shopping day in the holiday season as big as Prime Day. Maybe Black Friday, but they seem to stretch that out over a week or two. But maybe we'll see the effects of that. And what about these visibility tools? How did they not plan for them not being available? How did they not basically address that beforehand?
So from the article that I noticed on CNBC, it turns out that one of the reasons why is because the query that they're running for the performance engines is actually something that's custom built by Oracle. And so it's not readily available to people who are not running Oracle's database, which you would think, okay, well, that's a problem. Can't you replicate that somehow? And it's a checkpoint system, I guess, is the way that it is. And that's why this wouldn't have been completely avoided. It just would have given them a little bit of a heads up warning that they needed to reallocate some resources. And so I think it's interesting that Larry Ellison's comments are basically that Amazon is too dumb to migrate off of Oracle, or that it's going to cost them too much money. Some of the smartest people I know work at Amazon, and you've got a company that literally is building their own switches. They're literally building their own software stacks. They are re-engineering everything that they need from the ground up to do what they want it to do. Yeah, you know what? A hiccup in a database in a warehouse somewhere in Ohio that caused Amazon Prime Day to melt down. You got to remember that was back in July. It took them 3 months to release this correction of error report, which sounds an awful lot like a postmortem, like a blameless postmortem. You can better believe they've got this problem solved. You can better believe that they're going to have this in place when it comes to Black Friday, and they're also going to be able to figure out, maybe how to migrate those warehouses a little bit more effectively in the future so that it's all seamless. And then, December 31st, 2020, we're going to get a big notification from Amazon that says, hey, we're not paying our Oracle bill next year because we don't have to.
Well, hopefully they get it figured out, and then Larry Ellison can buy whatever he needs for a secret island fortress on Prime on Black Friday.
And thanks again for watching, Larry. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule at Oracle Open World and showing off your sailboat in San Diego Bay to watch the show. And we're thinking about you, buddy.
And we're really glad to have you as a fan.
That's just about going to do it for the Gestalt IT Rundown this week. Remember, if you missed any of this episode, we have full episodes, not only this one, but of all the ones we've done in the past, available on the Gestalt IT Facebook page, which you're probably watching this on right now. We also have them on YouTube, and we have a special audio podcast for those of you who don't want to try to watch my shining face when you're driving to work every day. Just search for the Gestalt IT Rundown in the podcatcher of your choice. And remember to catch us live on Facebook every Wednesday here at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific Daylight Time. Ken, if people want to learn a little bit more about you and see some of your great content, can they go to check you out?
They can find me on Twitter at Ken Nalbone or at my blog, fullstackkengineer.com.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter as @NetworkingNerd. You can see some of my writing at networkingnerd.net. And you can also check out some of the things that I've been writing for gestaltit.com, which is your home for all kinds of enterprise IT news, and as well as unboxing videos and snarky news reviews from yours truly. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for Ken Nalbone, for Rich Stroffolino, and for the entire Gestalt IT family. I just want to let you know that you need to have a super sparkly day.